what would you say, because you know my research is in therapeutic methods to try and help severely alienated children who are now adult. Do you have any ideas around what worked for you therapy-wise? Because I know you've been in therapy.
Well, I didn't really attend therapy to deal with parental alienation and those
No.
senses of isolation, so isolation from that parent. So I really can't speak from there. What I think that I found that did the best for me was to find a partner who identified me as a person, not the behaviors that I exhibited. She believed in me and accepted me for what I was. But she also actively said that you could lead a better life. I think it was just getting some form of a compassionate awareness that you don't have to live the life that you're living and that you could do better if you wanted to. And I wasn't forced, but I became to want to be a better person.
So you've got to choose to walk into that space.
You must. You can't have it forced upon you. You're just going to build up resentment. You're just having someone else, maybe it's not the alienating parent, you've got some do-gooder, I'll call them, telling you what you should be believing. And then that's, if you're not susceptible to that, if you're not willing to accept that into your life, yeah,
well,
you just got someone else alienating you.
Yeah. You must have obviously needed, or the message resonated with you, that what she was telling you was something that you needed to hear. So
yeah, I think
you were attracted to that, and that is probably what helps you make that transition where you want to be a better person, or you want to, do something different than what you were led to do.
Yeah, I think even as a child, though, I knew that some of the things that my father was saying were not true, and that they were just angry outbursts, and they were, disparaging just for the sake of being disparaging, whatever nasty things you could say. So I knew as a child that these things were not true, but I think I had to be, I suppose, an adult to understand that what he was saying was true, but believe that they're not true. And then to look at my mother as a person. She's a very complicated person. She's also a very simple person. She was in a situation, she wanted to get away from it, she ran away. That's the simple explanation. And I accept her for that, and I understand her for that. But
she had
as a
4 children too, didn't she, between 15 and 20?
Yes,
and she had intergenerational trauma as well, so she didn't know who her father was either.
That's right. So like
never
I said,
met
she's
him.
also
She has
complex.
no idea. So
yeah,
there's a lot going on there. So we have to keep that in mind when we're dealing with human, like the humanness in us. It's not what you see now. There's a lot more to the background and what's coming through generationally, what we've been exposed to as children. All of this needs to be taken into consideration, and this is where we need to do a lot of the work. Sorry, yeah.
I was going to say, as I said, we as human beings, we can be very, very simple, but we're also very complex. Like I said, she left, but the complexity is what you just alluded to. There was so many other things going on in her background. I mean, the relationship with her mother, the fact that she didn't know who her father was. She only found out that the person that she thought was her father was not her father when she went to get my birth certificate, when she went to register me at birth, because she couldn't find her own birth certificate because the name that she grew up with wasn't her name. So she found that out at my birth certificate time because she couldn't put her name on my birth certificate. She didn't know who her own father was. She didn't realize that the person that she thought was her own father was not her father. So we as humans are simple people, simple with our motivations, but the things that affect those decisions are so complex sometimes and so interconnected with so many other strings. We need to accept people and say, yeah, that's a very simple decision that she's made, but what was behind all of that? And accept us.
That's a perfect message that you just shared with everybody, because what you're saying is that you have to look at the big picture, and sometimes we can be so tunnel visioned, and a lot of people around us are still tunnel visioned, and we're trying to open up and understand. So by you having that understanding for your mother has probably helped you in your path to healing. So when other people are listening to this, they can hear you say, my mom might have done something, that, you may not agree with, but I also understand why, which might help them think, well, maybe my mom had a reason, or maybe my dad had a reason. So that was really good that you shared that.
Yeah, I think if you look at it, life's not Hollywood. You know, the antagonist in the movie is not purely evil. The protagonist is not purely good. There is always something in background, some sort of motivation why they do this. You know, this is, and we're, like I said, we're very, very complex when you look at it.
And there's people behind all these stories. They're real people, and you know, they might have done something that a lot of people may not agree with, but there's, you know, Alyse and I talk about this quite often, that there's so much stuff that happens. You got to really get into all of it.
Absolutely. And as I said earlier, if your horizons are so limited by your lifestyle, you may not have the choices that, when I look at some things, I can see maybe 15 different decision outcomes or methods to solve a problem. If your horizons are limited, you might see one. And
it's about perspectivism. Absolutely. And our perspective is not always, well, it's never the only perspective. Let's face it. Like you sit in a room, because I teach group therapy, sit in a room with 8 to 10 people, and you ask every single one of them, what's your perspective on this object in the middle of the room? And they'll all have a different perspective. So, and we need to be able to hear each other's perspectives and listen deeply instead of correcting each other. My perspective's right, yours is wrong. It's not about this. We're seeing too much fighting. We're seeing too much correcting of each other. We're not allowing for the empathy to come through. And with regards to what Shane said before, the DNA stuff, what you and I were talking about earlier, Dawn, with the parenting stuff over in America that's going on, and people not putting fathers on birth certificates or lying about who the father is. What that's doing intergenerationally, you may think that the baby is not going to know or care, but intergenerationally, it's going to affect countless generations coming through with this, we don't know who my father was, or he never cared about me stories when he did care, or whatever. We need to start speaking the truth and sitting in our shit, because if we keep ignoring and lying and not thinking ahead for the future generations, we need to ask ourselves, is the decision that I'm making now going to affect the generations that are coming through? What's my grandchild going to say to me when they find out that the person that I got pregnant to wasn't actually the person who I had in my child's life, and then they found out? This stuff
always has the right to know.
Really messy. And over where you are, you're having big trouble with this stuff, aren't you, Dawn? Like, that was something that was part of your story too, wasn't it?
Yeah, we do have a big problem with, you know, are you a father because you are actually married to the mother, even though you were not actually the biological father? Your marriage certificate determines who's the father, which is totally wrong. That has to stop. We have to start putting and recording the actual father, because the child always has the right to know. And they will always.
Bizarre. Hearing that is so bizarre. How can that even have been passed as a law, that the person who you're married to is the father? Like,
I don't know.
What?
That blew my mind when I heard that in my first guardian ad litem case. So yeah, it was crazy.
I suppose maybe when you think about it, if with not surrogacy but donors, I mean, although this person might be the sperm donor, that doesn't make them the father. The person who's married might be the father. Maybe that was their motivation at the time.
Is that what you're referring to? It sounds like a different argument.
Yeah, if you donated something anonymously, then you wouldn't be necessarily put on that birth certificate. However, you know, if somebody was estranged from their marriage and they had a child with somebody else, the husband that they're estranged from is now responsible for that child, and they're the
really
birth certificate. Yeah, it's totally asinine when it comes to what our states do.
So
that sounds like they're using religious law.
Yeah, it's really interesting. It'd be like your ex-partner, Shane, replacing you as your daughter's child, as your daughter's father, when you're biologically her father. He
So
would now
For many
be
reasons.
Yeah. So
That
here
happened.
in the is, let's say, the person that is actually the father, he wants to be a father. All right. If he wants to be a father, he has to sue the husband for, first he has to prove that he is the biological father. Then he has to sue for custody. And so it
Yeah.
costs, hundreds of thousands of dollars sometimes for a father to actually have a right to be the father. And
How
then
is that
they have to
okay?
fight for custody.
How is that okay? Who can afford that in your average household? Where are where's the child's human rights
Well,
to their biological father?
well, yeah, but you also, I suppose, I mean, I'm just asking the question now. First off, the amount of money only affects the parents, but the child, if that child has believed that let's call it the non-biological father is their father, then to find out that this other man is suing that child's believed father for the right to be that child's father. I mean, what damage is that causing? I mean,
what psychological damage is that doing to the child? They'll be
to
listening
find
to
out
those
that this person is not your.
conversations.
And it's all administrative. It's all a matter of what the pen or the ink put on the paper. The person that recorded it, rather than doing it the right way to begin with, now they have to go through all this red tape just to.
Do the people making these decisions, have they ever had lived experience of what that is like?
I have no idea, but I mean, if they did, then I mean, this is one of the things
very questionable.
Yeah, as the chair for National Parents Organization, this is one of the things that I would like to see changed in at least my state, if not all of our states, that the actual biological father, so yes, we'll need a paternity test, but we can do DNA tests rather quickly now. And if there is a if there is an argument over who that father might be, then we take a paternity test.
Yeah.
And then you know who the father is, and that name goes on the birth certificate without a court hearing and without having to sue for your right to be a father.
I just find that so odd because that's not the case here, is it? In Australian law.
Oh, look, my father's not even on my birth certificate.
I know, but you're on your daughter's birth certificate, and she can't do anything. She couldn't even get a passport without checking in with you, and you've had nothing to do with her since she was a baby, and your ex has been married since then.
True.
And you still have rights.
I still have rights, but I mean, I was with her during the birth, and so I was there when the birth certificate was created. I think that if you are, say, a single pregnant girl, and you have that child by yourself, you can put whatever name you want on that birth certificate. You can even omit the father. I don't think that there's anything forcing the inclusion of a father. And you might even just turn and say, I don't know who the father is.
It would be better not to put them at all than to put the wrong person.
I would agree with that too, for all sorts of reasons too, because especially if you raise the child believing that that's your child for 5, 10, 15 years, and then to find out that it's not your child, that heartbreak on you and the child is it.
Yeah, we have some really high profile or high, at least really well-known cases going on right now where, for example, one person raised a child and then found out later that it wasn't his, but his ex has passed away. And now he thinks he's the sole parent, but the other parent, the actual biological parent, knows that he wasn't. So they knew that he wasn't actually the child's father, but they let him raise him anyway. They let him pay child support. And now that he thinks that he's the sole parent left, now he had to go to court and he lost custody of this child to the actual father. The actual father that actually let him pay for the child and think that he was the father, won custody, and now he gets paid the child support from the father that they duped this whole time. He has to pay the biological father child support.
Is that because he's on the birth certificate?
I'm not sure if that's why.
That's all sorts of messed up, and it's unjust. It's absolutely unjust.
Tragic
Not to mention the cost of the psychological treatment that this child, adult, transitioning through life will have to pay if they choose to get it, or whether they don't. What is their life going to be like? Not knowing that, because we see in your mother, Shane, like the huge hole. She doesn't even now know who her father is or anything.
No, she's never met him. She knows his name, but she also has no desire to meet him. You know,
well,
but also we can see
to step into that space too, in case she gets re-abandoned. Like there's a whole other conversation there too.
I think for kids though, one of the things when you hear a lot of kids saying, I really don't care, you grew up thinking, oh, I really don't care. You don't know what you don't know. So by saying, I don't really care if I ever met him, or I don't want to meet him, you don't really know that that's your answer, because you have
a
curiosity.
Self-preservation.
Yeah.
I do a lot of that. It's a way to avoid stepping into an emotional space that may not be to your benefit. It may not work out the way you want. It may not be the happy fantasy joy experience that you have in your mind.
But it's worth
so you just don't do it.
And talking to other people like us. It's worth talking about it, at least in a safe space, to consider it. You know, you don't have to like go rushing back to that person, but we could talk in a group, or, try and help someone as they're walking through that decision, because it is a very personal, and it can be very scary.
Yeah. Well, I've reunified with my dad. You did too, Dawn, and that space we are very familiar with, because I was 25 years alienated from my dad. You were 40, weren't you? Like something.
44 years.
44 years. Unfathomable.
Yep. So I get really upset with people that talk about, well, the child shouldn't have to spend an hour in the car to go see dad, or they shouldn't have to, get on a plane to go visit mom. Yes, they should. Yes, they should. They need to go spend that time.
Absolutely. I totally 100% agree. Unless
there's... If you're talking about
criminal stuff going on, no, but it's safe stuff, yeah.
If you're talking about an hour car trip every weekend, or every other weekend, let's say, so twice a month you go spend 2 days a week. So you're talking about 4 days a month, and you had to spend an hour to and from. So you spent 4 hours traveling to go see that parent. If you times that 4 hours times the entire year's worth, so you're timing that by 26. Then let's take the amount of time in years. So I was separated for 44 years. So we're talking about that multiplication. And now let's look at the hours in that, with that lens. And how many hours was it that I missed with my father because somebody didn't think I needed to spend a couple hours in a car as a child? So I didn't have a relationship.
Were you consulted in that, or they made that decision on your behalf?
I wasn't consulted in that.
So they didn't ask you what you wanted?
That was a recent case in Pennsylvania, that was the reason why they didn't want the law to be shared parenting, because children shouldn't have to be burdened with this. Well, they're burdened anyway. They're burdened one way or the other. I'd rather see them spend an hour in a car and having a relationship than going their whole...
The long-term consequence is far outweighs that hour in the car.
Exactly.
Are they kidding?
Determines what the burden is? I mean, I know kids who travel further than that for school every day.
Yeah, exactly. They stand out at the bus stop for 20 minutes, 30 minutes in the cold. So, I mean, come on, guys. Kids deserve to know their parents. And if one parent doesn't like the other parent, that's not the child's problem. That's not the child's problem.
Exactly. And they're punishing. This is what I see, is that the child's the one who ultimately bears the blame. The alienated parent and the targeted parent, I mean, they're basically fighting a proxy war, and I was a chess piece. Children are the chess piece. They're the things that you move around the board to hurt and affect the other parent. And the other one that ever loses is the child. The two parents, they'll go on with their own lives, and they're generally well adjusted enough that they could, disregard the shit that's being said. Some of the male parents and female parents, obviously, they're not going to see their child, and that can be really harmful for. But the child takes the worst of it. The child takes the worst of it.
And
my brother and sister are wrecks.
Yeah,
they're absolute wrecks.
Right.
All right. And I don't associate with them a lot of the time because they're just wrecks. I couldn't have them around my house.
So what I'm
I'd
not
be worried
seeing,
that shit's going to be stolen.
is, this advocacy in the courtroom for the child to spend an hour in the car. So when this person made this comment and tried to have this law changed or not be passed, nobody was there to say, listen, I missed my father. I didn't get to spend that hour in the car and I wish I did. We don't have that. We need
to have a voice in the courts.
We need
because it sounds like someone without our perspective made that decision.
Exactly.
And they should not have been making that decision because they don't have the lived experience to make that decision.
They're not a psychologist, and they're practicing psychology in a courtroom, and they're not qualified or licensed.
That's not okay either.
So does the child have their own legal representation, which is separate and distinct from both of the parents' legal representation? So someone who's got the interests of the child at heart.
In most cases, there should be and there can be, but this was actually this hearing was actually to pass a law in one state to have a rebuttable presumption of equal shared parenting, which also would mean as close to 50-50 timeshare as possible. And they oppose that because the poor child shouldn't be burdened with this 1 hour car ride. And there's a lot of reasons why they oppose it. It's because if parents are not fighting in the courtroom, then there's certain attorneys that no longer make money.
Yeah.
It's that part of like Alyse was saying, that was on our earlier call, this is a multi-billion-dollar industry. So they don't want us passing these laws. But I'm here to say children first, lawyers get in line.
Absolutely.
And kids need both parents, and that's your tag. Kids need both.
Yeah. Absolutely. Kids, if they can, have a village. Not only do they need both parents, let's get the grandparents and the uncles and aunties. Raise children in the village concept again. I mean, that way they've got all sorts of influences and indoctrination.
Not of CPS. We need village as in family members, the community.
Yes.
Not Child Protective Services trying to
say
they're better at babysitting these kids.
No, I agree with you. You need uncles and aunties and grandparents and things like that to come in and be a part of that child's life. And I mean, you want someone who loves you, who's not paid to love you. So these child services, child protection services
they're overrun, they're burnt out. I deal with them all the time.
But they're employees too. They have no vested interest in you, technically. You're just another child. You're another one in the system.
And they also, here in the States, they get a kickback from the federal government for every single case that they have and they close. So they're actually getting part of what's called our Social Security. It's the DSM-5. So, or DSM, I'm sorry, I think it's DSM-4 actually. Anyway, we have, there's a system that takes away from our Social Security, which is supposed to be our retirement that we paid into, that carves it out to pay for child support or child care. So when someone needs to pay child support, they use this law to enforce usually the father. If they don't pay, then they go to jail. So this is all starts trickling down. And now we have these kids that are, the families are falling apart. The dads aren't dead beats, they're dead broke.
Dead broke. Yeah, I've heard that. Yeah, they're dead broke. Yeah. Oh my goodness. Okay. Yeah. It's time for us to stand up and speak about what we've seen, what we know, what it's like, and show people we are the end product. And maybe you guys and women need to really rethink what's happening out there. So on that note, do we want to finish and potentially pick up again another time? Because I know Shane's got to go to work.
Yeah.
So. Yeah, I'm actually more than willing if you ever want me back, and we can touch on whatever topic you like. I have no reservations. I've come to terms with everything a long time ago. I have no shame about what my childhood was like because it's something that happened to me, not that I instigated. So
it's
I'm
not who you are, it's something that happened to you. Yes.
That's right. I was a child and I had no control.
about having you is we have a lot of women that are coming forward, but we don't have a lot of men. So you really have a valuable spot here to speak to some of the men that don't come forward, and maybe you might be able to help them see or find a way to be able to come forward.
Okay.
Because they have a voice too, and this is that platform for us to activate our voices.
Yeah. Thank you for talking to us, Shane.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Appreciate it. Thank you a lot. Alyse, I will let you have the last word if you'd like.
Well, no, Dawn, I'll hand it over to you, actually. Yeah. Yeah.
I really appreciate you both being here, and I think the world of you guys, and I know that this is going to do good, that we will help people and we will help make massive change. And I called it a tidal wave of change to wake people up to our cause. And that's really what we need. We need the world to see this isn't just an American problem. This is everywhere.
It's global.
It's global. So that has to say something, that we're mistreating children, and parents need help. They need access to mental health themselves so that they can be better parents. And
Yes.
that's really what we really need to focus on.
And think about our decisions when we open our mouths now. What are our grandchildren going to be? How is that going to affect them? And when they come to us and ask us, and our children come up to us and ask us, why did you make that decision to get divorced, and why did all of this stuff happen to us in our lifetime? You better be ready to answer those questions, because children grow up and we have voices.
And maybe to help with communication in existing marriages, and have a recovery system that can maybe save the marriage. I mean, maybe not all of them are salvageable, because there's certain things that are just really hard to accept or forgive.
Yeah, absolutely.
But if it's communication, then we can work with communication.
Let's get some more parenting programs in. Let's get some more marriage programs in. Instead of pouring all this money into divorce, let's try and keep people together for the children's sake.
Yes.
It's a child human rights abuse.
How about let's make divorce harder?
Let's make divorce a lot harder than what it is. Yeah,
make
and let's
divorce
have
a lot friendlier.
Friendlier
where there's
dissolve
no
it.
Court,
Dissolve it. Don't just sever it and break it, and so that you leave these bitter halves. So sometimes you might just grow apart from someone. Dissolve it amicably.
Well, and I think we have to. The government makes money on your marriage, and then they also make money off of the dissolution of marriage, and then they make money off of your continued support of the child. And what's the problem with that is the non-custodial parent, because this is happening more and more for mothers, they pay the state the child support. The state takes their parts out, and then they give what's left to the custodial parent. Why not save that money? Don't go through divorce court. Don't go through that system. Save that money and spend it on your child. And you both make the decisions. You both try to have the same, equal households, trying to have the same quality as much as possible. And it's not going to be exactly the same all the time, but try to at least maintain a foundation for the child. And spend the money there. Don't spend it in court. Don't give the state the money that should go to your child.
Or maybe we could just turn around and say, my child is not a taxable commodity.
Right. All right. Well, I know we kept you far longer than we were supposed to, but I appreciate it. But it's what a story, Shane, and it's heartbreaking, but I really appreciate you sharing with us, and I definitely think we should do this again and continue on and see if we can help other men that are having they're in the same position, that has similar situations there.
And especially with adult survivors who have fathers who were the alienators. Very unusual. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay.
All right.
Okay.
Good night, everybody.